answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.
I woke up this morning, got myself a gun. Mama always said I'd be the chosen one.
What it's showing is that Ukraine isn't going to get any more territory. But what they can do is they can go deep into Russia, so they can bring the fight to the homeland. What this means is you take a step back. This war is not ending anytime soon. There's the prospect for any kind of peace negotiations. I think it's very grim, at least through the summer.
Does it change Putin's calculation?
Yeah, absolutely changes Putin's calculation. So Putin's plan was that the reason he's been doing all the bombing in Kyiv and in Ukraine for the last couple of weeks is it's preparing him for a summer offensive. You know, they don't fight in the winter because it's snow, it's mud, it's ice, so they do all the fighting in the spring and then the summer. So they were planning, I mean, Putin thinks, well, he's going to make great advances. He's going to, like, change the calculation. He's going to be in a much better position for negotiations, or maybe he goes for the whole thing if he has a good summer. He's now rethinking that because he has been utterly humiliated.
Yeah. Humiliated and probably deeply angry, maybe at those around him, not his own mistakes, obviously. That was KT McFarland, former deputy assistant to the National Security Council, talking about Putin's reaction to the latest attacks by Ukraine. One that happened over the weekend when those trucks loaded with missiles got deep inside Russia before they opened up their top and fired drone rockets into various military bases, striking anywhere from 50 to 60 or more major U.S. aircraft or major aircraft owned by the Russians. And then we also had yesterday an underwater demolition team blowing up the land bridge between Russia and Crimea. There's not a win-win on the side for Putin other than firing rockets into residential areas, killing civilians. KT McFarland is pointing out that Putin was maybe planning, look, come spring, we'll really be ready to roll over them. Well, it's spring, and it's going the other way. Things could escalate. You got to keep that in mind. We'll break it down in more detail in a moment. Glad to have you with us for hour number one. Larry Connors USA. We're here every Monday through Friday for you from 6 to 8 p.m. And reminding you, when we're on the air, we are streaming video. You can watch the program. You go to NewsTalkSTL Rumble, Facebook or Twitter, Larry Connors USA Rumble or Facebook, and you're watching the program. And if you miss any part of the program, video and or audio, and you want to hear it, watch it later, we make it available in podcast in various forms. News Talk STL podcast, LarryConnorsUSA.com, Larry Connors USA Facebook. And anywhere you want to find the podcast, you will find Larry Connors USA. Glad to have you on board and reminding you with Larry Connors USA, you are going to get news, opinion, analysis, and education. And today we got a lot to educate you about because when we finish each hour, you're going to walk away with more knowledge than you had when we began. There are a couple things I want to deal with right up front here and point out to you. We have reports that some Chinese nationalists got inside our country and were planning on basically trying to poison our food supply. Exactly what the plan was and how soon it could be enacted, if it could be enacted, I've got an expert coming up later in this hour to get into that issue. Another issue, since we're talking about our food supply, beef, pork, and other prices are up. Make no mistake about it. You can't hide it. When the prices are up, they're there. You're right there. You see them. Well, we've got Lana Schaefer, who owns Sunnyside Farms in Illinois, joining us in the second hour, talking about how beef prices are, how they're trying to manage it. But the reality is, among beef producers, pork producers, or whatever their livestock they're presenting, they have their own difficulties, I should say, regarding feed, cost, and everything else. It's a cyclical event, and it does run in cycles. And what happens today is not necessarily going to happen tomorrow. but for a while there's going to be a shakedown. And are tariffs having any effect? We'll get into that as well. Now, back to the issue with Putin trying to deal with Ukraine. KT McFarland said, if you look at the history of how Putin came in and what was done then, Putin knows the handwriting might be on the wall just looking at the history.
He's got to remember in his head, 25 years ago, the reason Putin came to power was because Boris Yeltsin, the previous head of Russia, he failed to get the Chechen insurgency under control. So Putin comes in, he massacres everybody there, destroys the capital city of Chechnya. He's the strong man that Russia wants, and he's been riding that wave for 25 years. So he's got to be thinking, whoa, if I'm looking like the guy who's not strong, if I'm looking like the guy who can't win in Ukraine, I might be in trouble. So I think that Putin is now in a position where he can make no concessions, not because of the war, but because of his domestic situation.
And the domestic situation includes those around him. Who knows what plotting is going on? We know among the Russian citizens, they're not happy with what he's done. He has sent millions of young men into battle zones basically to be slaughtered. And he lied to his people, saying, we're not going to invade. We're just preparing for military training exercises. And, of course, that was also a way to supposedly disguise what they're going to do with Ukraine and the world. But then it became evident, no, it was going to be an invasion. It was going to be a very costly invasion. They thought they were going to simply roll over Ukraine. The territory they have acquired in this battle so far is not much bigger than the state of Rhode Island. Now, he got Crimea when Obama was in office because nothing was done and made clear that you will not continue. We have, as this nation, been supplying numerous amounts of money, munitions, supplies to Ukraine during the Biden administration. In the beginning, I was in favor of it, but then I began to see, look, we're not getting any accountability. We don't know really where it's going and who's getting what. So I did not want us to spend more money, time, and effort, even though the Ukrainian people need it. We've got to say, look, we're not just going to throw it into the wind. Now, with Trump in the White House, I expect better accountability. I think we can definitely pinpoint where the money, the munitions are going. Putin knows the attitude of the U.S. has changed, not just because of Trump in office, but because Americans are realizing, look, we can't have this Russian bully roll all over Europe. And Ukraine is where he started. The Ukraine is where he needs to be stopped. And now that we have accountability, and we have an actual defense secretary and an actual commander-in-chief, he has to realize this is not going to be easy going forward. And then you've got the other front, aside from Russia. Yet they're all tied. You got China tied with Russia. China is also tied with Iran. Russia's tied with Iran. And Iran, of course, we're still trying to work out a deal with them. Trump is offering them. You want commerce or chaos. But if you're going to have commerce, you must get rid of all your nuclear facilities that you're using to build nuclear weapons. Well, there's a response from Iran.
Iran Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has now criticized and appears to have flat out rejected a proposal by the U.S. amid negotiations over Tehran's rapidly advancing nuclear program. His remarks a short time ago saying Iran refuses to give up enriching uranium in any possible deal, which is essentially the purpose of any kind of deal with the U.S. The demand has been made repeatedly by President Trump and his administration, though because the meetings have happened behind closed doors, it's not quite clear yet exactly how much U.S. Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff discussed in his initial proposal. Khamenei did not reject future talks between the U.S. and Iran on the issue, but again reiterated that Iran will continue to enrich uranium, which is a major step forward in its nuclear program and building nuclear weapons.
That news report makes it clear that Iran has no intention of backing off the plan to build nuclear weapons. So far. On the domestic front, Trump is having to deal with complaints from Elon Musk, on the great, big, beautiful bill. Fox News' Peter Ducey explains.
President Trump's big, beautiful bill already facing hurdles in the Senate, now facing some heat from Elon Musk.
Peter Ducey is live at the White House with the details. Good morning, Peter.
Good morning. And President Trump thinks this is simple. He now says about the big, beautiful bill, so many false statements are being made about the one big, beautiful bill. But what nobody understands is that it's the single biggest spending cut in history by far. There will be no cuts to Social Security, Medicare, or Medicaid. The president's problem, though, right now is that he's losing some Republicans he needs in the Senate, like Rand Paul. When Elon Musk posts that Congress is making America bankrupt, Rand Paul writes, "Some of us are trying to stop that." And the president responded to Paul. He said, Rand Paul has very little understanding of the BBB, especially of the tremendous growth that is coming. He loves voting no on everything. He thinks it's good politics, but it's not. The BBB is a big winner. But the one thing that got everybody's attention yesterday here at the White House was this post from Elon Musk. "I'm sorry, but I just can't stand it anymore. This massive, outrageous, pork-filled congressional spending bill is a disgusting abomination."
That's a very strong piece of language from Elon Musk. Trump's response so far is, I like Musk, but Musk also really doesn't understand the big picture any more than Rand Paul does. There is a report from the Congressional Budget Office claiming that the domestic policy bill proposed by Trump would increase our deficit by $2.4 trillion. That's the highest estimate I've heard. I don't know how accurate it is, but that's what they want you to buy into. Now, regarding the relationship between Musk and Trump, and more importantly, what Musk was doing to try to cut our deficit, and he's saying the big, beautiful bill is taking all the money I saved and uncovered as waste and fraud and just throwing it back into the machinery. Newt Gingrich, former House Speaker, was questioned about Musk's opinion.
Did Elon Musk just blow up the big, beautiful bill?
No, I think he's a brilliant guy. He single-handedly has put Americans back into space in a big way. But he doesn't understand politics. He proved over the last 4 months that it was an interesting experiment and it didn't work. And I think very few House or Senate members are going to take him seriously.
Really?
Yeah, they're just going to, I mean, look.
Oh, they dismiss his comment.
They're just going to say this is not, he doesn't know what he's talking about. Now, I do think there are senators who have very real concerns on the spending side. And Trump's going to have to work with them to find a way to make them more comfortable, because it's not an automatic yes. And some are very serious guys who've been around a long time.
I can't imagine it not passing. I mean, what would happen if it didn't pass?
If I have a big imagination. I can imagine it not passing, but I would bet that it will pass. But it will take Trump personally meeting with individual senators, listening to their concerns, and in some cases, finding creative solutions outside the bill.
Now, that is former House Speaker Newt Gingrich on with Stuart Varney of Fox Business News. There's also a story circulating behind the scenes as to why Musk is really upset.
And last night I was sent by some sources familiar with the drama behind the scenes an article that appeared in Axios that says Musk was upset that the big beautiful bill cuts an electric vehicle tax credit that he thinks hurts Tesla. Also, that one of his friends didn't get picked to NASA, that the FAA didn't use Starlink for air traffic control, and that he was not allowed to get an extension on his status as a special government employee.
Now, that's the report by Peter Ducey referencing Axios, which is a left-leaning publication. And their sources may or may not be factual, but they're suggesting that Musk got his feelings hurt and he's not getting something in return for what he put into it. That's what it's trying to say. In the meantime, Trump is now doubling tariffs on steel and aluminum. And he's also saying we're going to move forward on energy. Drill, baby, drill.
Drill, baby, drill. That mission being executed right now in Alaska, where the Trump administration is moving to unlock millions of acres in the National Petroleum Reserve by taking a bulldozer to Biden's crazy climate rules.
the White House to scrap a 2024 drilling ban that Interior Secretary Doug Burgum says wasn't just bad policy, but also broke the law and blocked energy projects critical to U.S. supply.
This is not a wilderness area. This was set aside back in the 1920s by President Wilson as specifically as a naval strategic petroleum reserve. And the idea that Biden could somehow try to turn it into wilderness last year with the stroke of a pen is ridiculous. This is a strategic petroleum reserve for the country.
It is for our nation. And of course, if the environmentalists had their way, you don't drill anywhere, you don't rely on fossil fuels, you just suffer. You suffer and you die without heat, food, supplies, and everything else that we benefit from fossil fuel. And that includes not just oil and gas. I would estimate 90% of everything you have in your home comes from fossil fuel product of one type or another. Alaska Congressman Bedgetts.
Nothing says that we can do responsible resource development in Alaska like 50 years of the Trans-Alaska Pipeline. You know, we have proven over decades that Alaskans know how to do resource development right. And in fact, many of the same objections that are being raised today were raised 50 years ago when that pipeline was being discussed. There was all kinds of discussion around the caribou herd. The caribou herd is stronger today than it was then. We know how to develop in harmony with nature, and we need this energy. You're 100% right. Whether it's AI or the growing demands of the reshoring of manufacturing to the United States, we've got to have stable baseload power. We have that power in abundance in the form of Alaska's natural gas, and we're looking forward to unleashing that for the benefit of not just Alaskans, but for the entire nation.
And we also have rare minerals that we would be getting from China if we're going to move forward with more EV production, electronic vehicles. We have those in our nation. We just need to have permits to start digging and going for them. If we're going to move in that direction at all, then it should use U.S. resources, not rely on China and other nations. We need to become energy independent at every level. That is part of what Trump is trying to do, making America great again. I'd mentioned at the top of the hour, this concern about China has been planning to basically poison our food supply. This is a very interesting story, has numerous twists. We'll discuss it when we continue. Lock and load, ready on the right.
You are listening to Larry Connors, USA.
In all these years that Wellington Environmental has been my sponsor, I've never mentioned their duct cleaning services. Allergy season is here, and Wellington crews clean air ducts daily in homes and commercial buildings, also cleaning air handling units and diffusers in commercial facilities. Why? Well, because people will see black dirt and mold on the vents, or they are actually suffering from allergies. Don't be fooled by low-cost duct cleaning providers saying they charge only per vent, because once they get on site, the price will skyrocket. Wellington does not do this, never has. Wellington will give you an estimate, and you say Larry Connors, and immediately you get a 20% discount. Call Cindy, 314-644-4930, 314-644-4930. Make your home and business better, safer with Wellington. Be well with Wellington. Ackerman Toyota is #1 in sales for 2024. That is 2 years in a row. It's really no surprise. Ackerman has the largest customer lounge where you can relax, take your time choosing new or premium pre-owned. Ackerman at Hampton and 44. AckermanToyota.com. Thank you for making Ackerman Toyota #1 2 years in a row. AckermanToyota.com. Ackerman Toyota for life. John Bill Roofing reminds you we are in the stormy season, and that means if you have even the smallest leak in your roof, you could soon have a much bigger issue. Call the John Bill to make sure that your biggest investment is protected. That call can save you major dollars. If you do get hit during a storm, John Bill has a rapid response team. Call 1-800-NEW-ROOF. 1-800-NEW-ROOF. 1-800-NEW-ROOF, John Bill. The Oak Street Inn and Lounge has some great news. The Speakeasy will now be open on Sundays, starting at 2. Open to the public. Great for those in the industry who'll want to enjoy a Sunday fun day. Plus, enjoy sushi and cocktails. What more could you want? You want to make sure you get the code. And how do you get the code to the Speakeasy? You go to the Facebook, Oak Street Inn and Lounge Facebook. I'll see you at Oak Street Inn and Lounge in Cottleville.
This is News Talk STL.
I guess I grew up on an older road. A pedal to the metal, always did what I was told. Till I found out that my brand new clothes came secondhand from the rich kids next door. And I grew up fast, I guess I grew up mean. There's 1,000 things inside my head I wish I ain't seen. And now I just wander through a real bad dream, or feeling like I'm coming apart at the seams. But thank you, Jack Daniels, oh, number 7. Tennessee whiskey got me drinking in heaven. And
This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.
Welcome back. Yesterday it was announced the FBI has arrested and the Justice Department is pushing charges against a 33-year-old and a 34-year-old, both from China. They're involved in trying to basically poison our food supply. Now, what they brought in is a fungus that would cause disease of wheat, barley, maize, and rice. So there goes our food supply. And even if you end up eating it, it doesn't destroy it. The toxins can lead to vomiting, liver damage, reproductive defects in humans and livestock. How did it reach to this point? What can be done? How real is this story? Brian Burek is a senior China policy advisor with the Heritage Foundation. Brian, good to have you with us.
Thanks for having me. And happy to speak about this pretty disturbing episode. But unfortunately, it's really just one of a string of recent instances where we have Chinese nationals violating visa laws, attempting to smuggle material in one direction or the other, and generally just flouting restrictions that were unfortunately laxly enforced for the last few years.
But and I hear what you're saying, I fully agree, but this was not just ignoring, overstaying visas, things like this was coming in with a plot to destroy America from inside by going after our food supply. Is that correct? That's the way you understand it?
That's correct. And in fact, one of the criminal charges that these individuals are facing is conspiracy and smuggling.
And what were they bringing in, and how would it work?
So it appears that these individuals are involved in research concerning, as you mentioned, a biological pathogen, which is a fungus that can destroy various staple food crops and has caused billions of dollars of economic damage in the past. I don't know that the FBI has articulated an intent behind the smuggling, but the fact of the matter is that these individuals knew what they were doing was wrong because they attempted to lie about it to investigators before subsequently disclosing that they did know that what they sought to smuggle was prohibited, which is an indication of, I'd say, of concern.
Do we know how they got into the country and what their plans were as they started to disperse it?
So it appears that one of the individuals who at the time was employed by the University of Michigan, may still be employed by the University of Michigan, was on a J-1 visa, but the co-conspirator who was caught with the pathogen attempting to enter the United States was traveling on a tourist visa. And obviously, even benign, permitted scientific research of the nature that they may have been seeking to do would have been prohibited on a tourist visa, and he would have had to essentially commit visa fraud by lying about his intentions.
If they carried out what they had intended, what would be the scenario?
So I think that, we haven't seen the Justice Department articulate that there was an attempt to, conduct any form of agroterrorism.
But there's no doubt. There's no doubt, right?
I would hesitate to get ahead of Kash Patel and the FBI in terms of articulating rationale.
I
think
know,
the
I
fact
know,
of the matter,
I know that, but at the same time, you can't give them a pass as to why you're bringing a fungus into our country that you're going to destroy our crops. Go ahead, sir.
and that's exactly why they're facing a litany of possible felony charges, and the facts that, as the FBI has laid out, are more than sufficient to support criminal prosecution if they're proven accurate, right? The simply bringing this material through a heavily trafficked airport, which happened, is a massive risk in and of itself.
To that extent, if that fungus had been exposed and got airborne inside an airport, would it cause immediate damage, or would it be noticed at that point as well?
I'm not personally familiar with the precise scientific level of risk, but I can imagine that crumpling a dangerous pathogen inside a packet of tissues and trying to smuggle it through customs is obviously an activity that we should be vigilant against, and I'm glad our law enforcement managed to catch it.
Do you think that because we did catch it, and I'm still not exactly clear, I'm not sure if you are, as to what alerted us to look for this guy and how the other guy got tied in? I haven't seen full details. Have you?
So, I'm not sure the circumstances that led law enforcement to question this particular individual, but they did, conduct searches of their electronic devices, discovered the linkages between these two individuals who had worked together before and may have been personally involved with each other. And in fact, it also appears in the law enforcement documents that these individuals had smuggled biological materials into the United States on prior occasions. So this is a repeated pattern of activity of smuggling material into the United States through our customs illegally.
You're listening to Brian Burek with the Senior China Policy Advisor for the Heritage Foundation. So with that evidence that they had done it previously, what do we know as to what they accomplished once they got it inside the U.S.?
So it looks like in this case, regarding the pathological fungus that could have been extremely dangerous to U.S. crops, whatever the conspiracy was, it failed. It did not make it out of the airport, and the individual who was attempting to carry it into the United States was deported immediately and did not enter the United States. So in this case, it's a win for U.S. law enforcement. Any potential threat was, subverted and taken care of.
But you pointed out one was, and still is, at last report, employed by the University of Michigan.
Yeah, and I believe based on the materials that the Justice Department has released so far, that individual has been denied bail and remains under detention as a flight risk and can't travel currently.
Are we looking at a situation of we had to be 100% accurate every time? They only need to be right once.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I mean, there between this case, there are other instances at the University of Michigan where a number of individuals were caught attempting to spy on a U.S. military exercise with Taiwan nearby. There are a plethora of other similar instances where we have a pretty strong indication that espionage activity is being conducted under the cover of student visa. It's enough to conclude that there's definitely a lot of problematic activity slipping through the cracks. And I think it's an overall vindication that Secretary Rubio has announced plans to tighten scrutiny over visas to Chinese nationals for exactly this reason.
All right, for specifically Chinese nationals, but that doesn't mean they won't use other carriers and have other opportunities.
That's certainly possible.
All right, so again, back to the scenario, without trying to frighten anyone, because it's been stopped to our knowledge at this point. If that kind of fungus were released upon our crops and it got into our food system, what could be the ultimate result?
So, my understanding is that it could potentially, a widespread outbreak could destroy, potentially billions of dollars worth of food supply. So, at that point, it would fall to whatever domestic systems we have in place to try to contain those outbreaks. But, I for one, don't want to find out just how bad it could get, what kind of shortages we could face, what kind of farmers would be devastated by this activity. But and I'm very glad that it was stopped at the border.
Are the products that would get on the shelves for American consumers?
Exactly. Like the this is everything. Could potentially implicate any sort of product that's derivative of grain, right? So not just dried grains, but bread and other staples that we rely on every day.
So we have, again, this is Chinese nationals, and Secretary Rubio is going to tighten that. And we have no idea. We have no idea of how many came in on these visas or whatever, even without any vetting whatsoever with our open border policy under the Biden administration. Does it stretch the mind to say that there are many more out there yet to be caught?
No, I mean, it doesn't at all. I think one thing that's disturbed me over the last few years is that during the first Trump administration, one of the key types of national security cases that were lodged against Chinese espionage agents were visa fraud prosecutions. We did not see visa fraud prosecutions continue under the Biden administration. This, the facts articulated in this case, some of the charges that they're facing are visa fraud charges. So I'm very glad that we're beginning to prosecute visa fraud again. But we saw the Biden administration for 4 years basically take a pause on pursuing visa fraud prosecutions. There were a few national security cases relating to China over the years, but it's a particular area that has gone unenforced for at least the last 4 years.
Yeah, but Brian, you start enforcing that, you're going to have folks holler, xenophobic, you're anti-Chinese, you're anti-yellow.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's one of the reasons I think why the Biden DOJ shirked from its duty in this case. But the fact of the matter is that even before those years, there were successful convictions on visa fraud charges, right? So, if you're actually yielding convictions that are upheld against appeal, clearly there's actual illegal activity to be dealt with, and we need to do so.
All right. I want to thank you, sir. You've been listening to Brian Burrick, Senior China Policy Advisor for the Heritage Foundation. Thank you for your time and your insight.
Thank you so much.
You bet. Folks, you stop and think. I don't want your mind to start going crazy, but pathogenic microorganisms spread across our nation. Frightening, is it not? In our second hour, we're going to talk to a beef farmer about their concerns about safety of their product as well as the price. But up next, the auto pen story.
You can connect with Larry on Twitter at Larry Connors USA.
I've got a phone number for you and a website where you can take a free, quick survey to learn how to use artificial intelligence, AI, to put your company on a fast track to the future. Here's the number. It's a 636 area code, 636-689-0545. 689-0545. This is PRI Global. And recently, the St. Louis Business Journal named PRI Global as a leading IT consulting company. 25 years working with hundreds of companies, several Fortune 500, locally and around the world. PRI Global has its own AI lab to develop what's best for your company. Take the free survey and be on your way to the future. 636-689-0545. 689-0545. Or go direct PRIGlobal.ai. PRIGlobal.ai. You want the best place to watch baseball or any sport and be able to enjoy premium cigars and whiskeys? Lit Cigar Lounge. Lit has so many events each month. You need to constantly check the Lit Cigar Lounge Facebook. You don't want to miss anything. Plus, you can order food from Napoli Brothers Pizza and Pasta, delivered within minutes right to your table. By the way, we're in the season for great patio dining. Napoli Brothers Pizza and Pasta has your table waiting. Since 1995, Renewal by Andersen has helped St. Louis homeowners upgrade with windows and doors. Now it's our 30th anniversary sale. You'll get $1,995 off every project. No gimmicks, real savings, and the nation's best warranty. The offer ends June 30th, so you don't want to wait. There are some restrictions. Visit rbastl.com. Renewal by Andersen. Superior products, exceptional service. Hey, if you're 50 or older, you do not want to take any risk with your money. In fact, you want Leslie Consulting. My friend Bob Leslie can show you a gain and retain plan. It means that you never lose. Plus, you get up to a 20% bonus on day one. Leslie Consulting, a leader in brokerage and risk management. 314-721-0066. LeslieConsulting.com.
This is News Talk STL.
This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.
I'm also here to say this morning that we're expanding the investigation. Obviously, there were more than those 4 staffers that were involved in the auto pen. We're going to start bringing in additional staffers. They're going to be receiving communication from the Oversight Committee today, and we're going to be asking them to come in as well. We're going to bring in everybody that we think had anything to do with the decision-making process as to how these executive orders and pardons were signed using the auto pen.
That is going to be a key thing we want resolved. That is James Comer, House Judiciary Committee, investigated House Oversight, I should say. And they want to know about this auto pen and how many times it was used by the Biden administration, not by Joe Biden, but by the Biden administration to sign executive orders, legislative action. Those particular items are supposed to be signed in person by the president with his full knowledge and acceptance. That's why he puts his signature on them. If you had an auto pen at your house and you were getting forms sent to you from banks offering you credit cards or things of that nature, you could use an auto pen, sign all that away, you could care less. But then when the bills start coming in, you realize, I shouldn't have done that. In this case, the auto pen is designed to sign multiple signatures in a period of seconds for birthday cards, greetings, anniversaries, things of that nature, direct from the White House, from President Joe Biden with his signature. But it was an auto pen signature. Let me ask you this. Can you write your signature the same way more than once, maybe 10 times? Would there be some variation? I'm willing to bet there is. I don't know anyone that can be precise with their signature each and every time to have it look exactly like it, where you can lay it right on top of it and see that it matches it. I know mine doesn't. Now, I could care less. Now, on one hand, anybody could fake my signature because you can't really read what it is. On the other hand, it's hard for me to look at it sometimes. Say, did I? Yeah, I signed it. I know what I'd signed. But Joe Biden, with his signature, they're using the auto pen to sign these pardons that he gave, and he wasn't even aware of them. And that raises that other question, because behind that was cash paid or some kind of exchange made for someone to get a pardon, and who benefited from that exchange, in addition to the person being pardoned and out of jail or criminal charges. And again, sometimes if you track down the dates of some of these events, Joe Biden was not even in the White House. Could he have signed them while he was on vacation at Rehoboth Beach laying out in the sun? Yes, he could have, but not likely. That is why James Comey wants to go in there and take a good, close look at it. Wants to take a good, close look at it and see what has been going on here. And what do we know? Well, there's a cadre of folks that were around Biden. We discussed this yesterday around Dr. Jill Biden and her first aide, or as they call her, her husband, her work husband, who was always around her, had been with her since Joe Biden was vice president, and always looking for a way to help and carry out whatever she wanted. He was one of 4 or 5 Congress wants to talk to all of them and get them in front of a congressional hearing under oath and ask directly, did you use access to the auto pen? Did you exercise it? Then for what reasons, what purpose, and under what direction? Now, if they were acting on orders and instructions they were given, I would think that'd be very clear and evident about that. I mean, would you want to lie in front of Congress to protect someone because they had you do something? You put yourself into perjury. You put yourself behind bars. That's not likely to happen. The congressman continues.
We're questioning all the ones that were made in the last year. We're really focused on the ones made in the last 100 days. I've said this before. There was more activity out of the White House during the last 100 days than at any point in the previous 3.5 years of the Biden administration. This is at a time when you're talking about post-debate. The secret was out. Everyone knew Joe Biden wasn't at the top of his game at best, or in a complete state of mental invalidness at worst. He was spending the majority of his time in Delaware. He wasn't even in the White House. We know who was in the White House at the time. There were staffers and family members that spent a lot of time in the White House at that time. That's when all of the executive orders were signed using the auto pen. So we want to know the process. We've identified, first of all, the staffers that actually were tasked with putting the documents in the auto pen and pressing the power button. We want to know who gave them the authority to do that.
Yeah. Who said, go ahead and push the button and make it start signing papers that we slip under it? And that will be a congressional hearing. It may be behind closed doors to begin with, but it will end up being in public, as it should. And we're already continuing to uncover lie upon lie that was pushed upon us by the Biden administration. And that includes former FBI Director Christopher Wray. He lied to Congress. Christopher Wray lied to Congress in his testimony over the extent of the FBI's anti-Catholic surveillance. Now, he will look for words to try to massage it, but what he did was lie. The FBI relied on the Southern Poverty Law Center, which originally was built with the guise of helping people, especially those of color, who were beat down and were not getting proper and lawful treatment at the hands of usually white Democrats in southern states. Southern Poverty Law Center. And they needed representation. But then it got weaponized. We could use it against anyone for any reason. We just play the race card. So the Southern Poverty Law Center was giving the FBI information supposedly identifying Christians and conservative organizations as hate groups. Yeah, they had a hate map and put them on there, and identifying some Catholic groups to be targeted. Now, former President Biden's FBI director engaged in a cover-up to hide how sweeping this was. When he was originally questioned by Congress, he said, that was just a single memorandum. It was an outlier. It happened one time, not a big deal. New documents just released by Senator Chuck Grassley, Republican of Iowa, say the FBI actually had a bureau-wide investigation into what they called, and I'm quoting, radical traditionalist Catholics. What does that mean? Catholics that deal in Latin masses? They were supposedly plotting to overthrow the government or something? But based on these complaints and the hate map and hate groups identified by the Southern Poverty Law Center, the government believed that these Catholics, quote, were anti-Semitic, anti-immigrant, anti-LGBTQ, and that they were white supremacists. If you're a Catholic or a Christian, you rely on two parts of the Bible, the Old and the New Testament. The Old Testament is the Jewish Torah, basically. So you're not really a Christian if you don't accept the Old Testament and the teachings that came from Moses and all the other prophets. But this memo that they were putting out apparently was distributed to more than 1,000 FBI personnel across the country. It all got blown apart by a whistleblower in 2023, and then when he was testifying, Wray in his March 2023 testimony claimed he was aghast. He was aghast when he was asked about the memo. And he said, and I'm quoting, "I took steps immediately to withdraw it and remove it from the FBI system. It was a product by one field office, which, of course, we have scores and scores of these products, and when we find out about it, we took action." But he did not acknowledge another draft intended for distribution across the entire Bureau. They just didn't do it. And in fact, in a letter to the FBI director we have now, Kash Patel, Senator Grassley pointed out, this was clearly a separate product since it involved a different planned distribution to the whole Bureau, a different chain of events. And he said this is proof, once again, that Director Wray, his testimony to Congress about it being a single product was false. In other words, you lied. You perjured yourself before Congress. By God, I want to see prosecution. Not only him, but others that were involved. I want them arrested, charged, and locked up for perjury. Make it happen. In the meantime, the leftist media continues every effort it can to distract, cover up, and lie anything that's going to be bad for them. But White House Press Secretary Leavitt says, not with the Trump administration. That story when we continue.
You are listening to Larry Connors, USA.
The Napoli heritage of fine dining continues with Napoli Kirkwood. Napoli Kirkwood, now open. So add that to Cafe Napoli in Clayton, Napoli 2 in Town and Country, Napoli 3 in St. Charles, right next door to Napoli C, and don't forget about Napoli Brothers Pizza and Pasta in the district, Chesterfield Valley. All of those locations, plus now, open, Napoli Kirkwood.
This is Larry Connors, USA. Larry Connors, USA.
And on my very first briefing several months ago, I said I would hold anyone accountable in this room. The Washington Post actually had this headline, "The Mysterious Drop in Fentanyl Seizures on the U.S.-Mexico Border." How is this mysterious? There is no mystery about why there is a decrease in fentanyl coming into the United States. This administration's strong border policies are the reason there has been a decrease in fentanyl trafficking. His strengthened relationship with Mexican President Sheinbaum and all of the measures he has been taking to deter illegal human and drug trafficking at our United States southern border is the reason for plummeting fentanyl seizures at the U.S. border. There is nothing mysterious about that, and we'd like to see the Washington Post update their headline accordingly. This is clearly trying to intentionally manipulate the minds of the Americans, and I think the American people understand why there's been a fentanyl drop. And our office responded to this inquiry. We provided a whole host of the reasons that fentanyl seizures at the southern border have dropped, and the Washington Post refused to run them, and that's despicable.
Yeah, when the White House gives you details and the Post won't even run it, you want to stick to your story that you're appalled and you're surprised and everything. The White House claims this is why. You should at least do that should do it for balance. But they're not interested in balance in journalism. It is so refreshing to have Carolyn Leavitt at the White House podium. Oh, what did I hear you say? Where is KJP? Karine Jean-Pierre? Here's another good story for you. Karine Jean-Pierre, who served as White House press secretary under President Biden, has switched her party affiliation. She's leaving the Democrats. She's going to go independent. She points out, until January 20, I was responsible for speaking on behalf of the President of the United States. That's true. At noon on that day, I became a private citizen who, like all Americans, and many of our allies around the world had to contend with what was to come and next for our country. We need to be clear-eyed and questioning rather than, and she had to almost choke on these next words. That she could say them amazes me. She said, we need to be clear-eyed and questioning rather than blindly loyal and obedient. Look, if you're hired to be press secretary, I got it. That's your job. Go out there and sell the sizzle, even if you don't have the steak. And you sell the story the White House wants to put out. If you can't, then you're not going to have the job. That I understand. But you reach a point, you should. I'm not going to put up with this BS anymore, and I'm not going to be peddling it for you. You go ahead and find someone else, and you certainly can. You've got a lot of lackeys out there that are willing to come around and just piddle here and piddle there and take a dump over there, and it's all supposedly factual information from the White House. When I know it's a lie, I guess that would call for someone of integrity. If you're willing to sell your soul for a position to be in the White House as president or press secretary, it equates to the same thing. Coming up in our next hour, an Illinois beef farmer talking about how they're trying to deal with the prices and everything else. And do not forget our pledge, one nation under God.
You can hear podcast of this program at Larry Connors USA Facebook. Larry Connors USA Facebook.
John Bill Roofing reminds you we are in the stormy season, and that means if you have even the smallest leak in your roof, you could soon have a much bigger issue. Call the John Bill to make sure that your biggest investment is protected. That call can save you major dollars. If you do get hit during a storm, John Bill has a rapid response team. Call 1-800-NEW-ROOF. 1-800-NEW-ROOF. 1-800-NEW-ROOF, John Bill. Great patio season to enjoy any of the Cafe Napoli locations. How about the Napoli Brothers Pizza and Pasta in Chesterfield? Enjoying coal-fired pizza, nothing else like it. Napoli Brothers Pizza and Pasta in Chesterfield. A few doors down, Lit Cigar Lounge, where you can enjoy premium cigars and whiskeys. Check the Lit Cigar Lounge Facebook for details, plus gift cards for friends. I'll see you at Lit Cigar Lounge in Chesterfield. Ackerman Toyota is #1 in sales for 2024. That is 2 years in a row. It's really no surprise. Ackerman has the largest customer lounge where you can relax, take your time choosing new or premium pre-owned. Ackerman at Hampton and 44. AckermanToyota.com. Thank you for making Ackerman Toyota #1 2 years in a row. AckermanToyota.com. Ackerman Toyota for life. It's that time of season when families, businesses are moving. For local or long distance, I endorse McGuire Moving. Get a date set soon before the schedules are booked. 314-241-0600. 241-0600. McGuire is constantly giving back to our veterans, such as Support Dogs for Our Brave. So with McGuire, you're getting excellent service and helping our vets. McGuireMoving.com. So many times, Vincent's Jewelers has helped me surprise someone special. Vincent's locally owned can do the same for you, and you don't have to break the bank to get something really nice, maybe even customized. The smile you're going to get back from that special someone, priceless. Check VincentsJewelers.com every day because new items are arriving and there are special deals. Vincent's, my only jeweler. VincentsJewelers.com. VincentsJewelers.com. I can tell you how to get a free quick quiz to see how artificial intelligence can boost your company's potential. You go to PRIglobal.ai, PRIglobal.ai. St. Louis Business Magazine listing PRI as one of the leading IT companies. And PRI has its own AI lab to develop what your business needs. PRIglobal.ai. PRIglobal.ai.
This is News Talk STL.
You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.
Got myself a gun. Mama always said I'd be the chosen one.
Iran Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has now criticized and appears to have flat out rejected a proposal by the U.S. amid negotiations over Tehran's rapidly advancing nuclear program. His remarks a short time ago saying Iran refuses to give up enriching uranium in any possible deal, which is essentially the purpose of any kind of deal with the U.S. The demand has been made repeatedly by President Trump and his administration, though because the meetings have happened behind closed doors, it's not quite clear yet exactly how much U.S. Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff discussed in his initial proposal. Khamenei did not reject future talks between the U.S. and Iran on the issue, but again reiterated that Iran will continue to enrich uranium, which is a major step forward in its nuclear program and building nuclear weapons.
Is that a glimmer of hope that they're willing to have more talks, followed by the statement that we're going to continue building nuclear weapons? It's hard to say with the Iranian leadership, the Ayatollah. They were given a free pass by the Obama administration originally. Yeah, go ahead. You can do what you want. We trust you. We trust that you're going to build only for nuclear reactors to improve the life and lives of your people, not create weapons of mass destruction. And the UN was involved in part of that deal. We'll send in inspectors from time to time from the Atomic Energy Program, and they'll go in and inspect. But they could not show up unannounced. They could not go where they wanted to go. And in fact, many times they were simply taking whatever Iran gave them and repeating it that this is fact, when they knew it wasn't a fact other than what had been supplied by Iran. With all the troubles we have in the world right now, the Iranian issue continues to play a central issue, not just because of their proxy wars, which do continue, but because if they got a nuke, if they have a nuclear capability, not just the entire Mideast, but the world is under a new threat. The U.S. and Russia and China obviously are not the only nations with nuclear weapons. India and Pakistan have them, for example. But you cannot have Iran have one. And here's the other issue. If Iran gets one, then you're going to have other Middle East countries want, well, I want one too. We're back to the battle over how many times can you kill the earth. That argument was under discussion and, in fact, literally up for debate for a college debate classes when I was going to college. We had more than enough nuclear weapons then between U.S. and Russia to destroy the earth 300 times over. I'd say that's overkill. But the more concerning part is who's got their finger on the switch. So Iran is again rejecting what Trump wants. He's made it clear, look, we can help make you a grand country. You can look like the Dubai. Great, beautiful towers and everything rather than rubbles and rocks. But you cannot have nuclear weapons. Do you want commerce or do you want chaos? If you ask the people and you were getting a legitimate answer from the people, they would no doubt vote for, I want commerce. I want an opportunity to live for me and my family to benefit. Do I want to be like a Westerner? Maybe, maybe not. But it beats living in the rocks and rubble we're in right now. Of course, that would also mean you'd have to recognize women are women and they have their rights. And even if you don't like gay people, you can't simply stone them to death as they do in Iran, which always comes back to the idiocy on our college campuses of those supporting the PLO and Hamas and holding up signs, queers for Hamas. They would kill you on sight. Hey, thanks for joining us. Hour number 2. Larry Connors USA. We're here every Monday through Friday for you from 6 to 8 p.m. And when we're on the air, we are streaming video. You can watch the program. You go to NewsTalkSTL Rumble or Facebook or Twitter. Larry Connors USA Rumble or Facebook. And everything goes up as a podcast when we complete, video and audio. Available at NewsTalkSTL, LarryConnorsUSA.com, which, by the way, you can push a button to subscribe. We need minimum information, and we will send it to you on a daily basis. You won't miss anything. You don't have to go look for it later. And we do not share your information with anyone. And you can also find it at Larry Connors USA Facebook. Reminding you, while many are calling out this month as Pride Month, many corporations have backed away from it. Many major sports teams are not acknowledging it in any way. There are at least a dozen NFL teams that have not put up anything honoring Pride Month. What we're doing here, though, is we are honoring vets. Vets for Vic. And every day he will nominate or will pull a name or two and talk about a veteran that you submit. How do you do that? You go to NewsTalkSTL.com and you get all the information on how to send in someone you think deserves to be recognized. They could be deceased. They could be alive. They could be in the military now. They may be out of the military. And it makes no difference what their job was, what their MOS was. If they were assigned to be a lawyer inside the military, they were doing what the military wanted them to do. If they were assigned to be in the trenches as a grunt, that was their job. So all those that you want to see recognized, friend, family, relative, go to NewsTalkSTL and see that you send the email direct to Ken at NewsTalkSTL, listing different information about the one they can honor. Coming up later in this hour, we're going to be joined by a beef farmer from Illinois and about how she got started and how bad things may or may not be now and what's going to happen, not only for the farmers, the beef ranchers and so forth, but you, the consumer. That ranch is in Greenville, Illinois. We'll have details of that coming up later for you. And reminding you always, with Larry Connors USA, you get news, you get analysis, you get opinion, and you also get education. You leave each hour with more information than you had before you started listening. So one of the big deals that we're still trying to figure out, and I think we know the answers. Let me put it this way. We do know the answers. We just want more details. And James Comer is leading the investigation into senior ex-Biden aides and what they knew and the use of the auto pen with Joe Biden's signature. James Comer.
I'm also here to say this morning that we're expanding the investigation. Obviously, there were more than those 4 staffers that were involved in the auto pen. We're going to start bringing in additional staffers. They're going to be receiving communication from the Oversight Committee today, and we're going to be asking them to come in as well. We're going to bring in everybody that we think had anything to do with the decision-making process as to how these executive orders and pardons were signed using the auto pen.
Yeah, they want to talk to all of them. Now, I don't know that she would have had access to the auto pen, but she was the official White House spokeswoman, Karine Jean-Pierre, In the previous hour, I told the audience what she is now doing. One, leaving the Democrat Party. But there's something else she's doing. And I'll have that for you before we wrap up this hour. But did she also have access to the auto pen to take whatever she put out to the, quote, press as saying, this came direct from Biden, here's his signature? We need answers. James Comer said, I'm going to widen the net. We're going to pull more of them in front of us.
We're questioning all the ones that were made in the last year. We're really focused on the ones made in the last 100 days. I've said this before. There was more activity out of the White House during the last 100 days than at any point in the previous 3.5 years of the Biden administration. This is at a time when you're talking about post-debate. The secret was out. Everyone knew Joe Biden wasn't at the top of his game at best, or in a complete state of mental invalidness at worst. He was spending the majority of his time in Delaware. He wasn't even in the White House. We know who was in the White House at the time. There were staffers and family members that spent a lot of time in the White House at that time. That's when all of the executive orders were signed using the auto pen. So we want to know the process. We've identified, first of all, the staffers that actually were tasked with putting the documents in the auto pen and pressing the power button. We want to know who gave them the authority to do that.
Yeah, I want to know. I want to know, don't you? Who told them? Go ahead and put Joe Biden's signature on this. It's one thing if you're using the auto pen as it originally was intended to sign multiple signatures for birthday cards, greetings, best wishes, things of that nature. That's standard. That's okay. But when it comes to legislation, or pardons for that matter, Joe Biden himself should have been signing those, or at least acknowledging, yes, this list of pardons I approve, they can go to the auto pen and it will be given. But we're not sure if he knew about all the pardons. And we're still not sure what was exchanged for some people to get, quote, a pardon from Biden. We do know, and certainly believe, let me put it that way, that some of those who got pardons were given pardons so they could not be called as a witness to testify against him in any way. That could still happen. We have a lot of lack of public trust in the nation right now, and rightly so. We've been lied to repeatedly. And when it comes to the economy, again, are we getting facts or not? Well, we have seen cases where the Biden administration would lie and change the numbers around. CNN did a survey about the public opinion on the economy, and it wasn't the one they thought they would get. They thought they would find more people upset. So therefore, they decided our survey is not good because the results are politicized.
The poll also asked which party best reflects their view on a range of issues. And when it comes to crime, the economy, immigration, Republicans still hold an advantage, although actually those numbers are starting to slip. How did you think about this poll as you were looking through?
I couldn't help but be reminded about a big problem in my part of the world, the econ part of the world. We can't get a clean read on how consumers feel about the economy because the data has been infected by partisanship, really in an unprecedented manner. So,
meaning your partisanship reflects whether or not you think the economy is good or not?
Do people think the economy is not doing well, or do they just not like who's in the White House? This is a huge problem right now, and it's making it impossible to get that clarity that economists like to see about how consumers are doing. Do they intend to spend? Makes it impossible to forecast.
Could it be that the number at the total of your grocery bill tells you if it's good or bad, or that you believe it's going to get better? And for the first time, they're acknowledging partisanship interfering with a poll. How many times do you think CNN and others have done polls knowing damn well it's going to be affected by political partisanship? And yet they do it anyway. Well, if they claim that, then how are they going to respond to one of their own? One of their own, Harry Enton, with CNN and this poll.
After all of the waves, Kate Baldwin, after the last few months, the first 5 months of the Donald Trump presidency, right, the first 4 months of the Donald Trump presidency, that you expect that Democrats would have this massive lead on the economy. It ain't so. It ain't so. The party that is closest to your economic views, in November of 2023, it was the Republicans by 11 points. Now it's still within that range, still within that margin of error. Plus 8-point advantage for the Republican Party. How is that possible, Democrats? How is that possible after all the recession fears, after the stock market's been doing all of this, after all the tariffs that Americans are against, and Republicans still hold an 8-point lead on the economy? Are you kidding me? If it was just this one CNN poll, that would be one thing. But take a look at Reuters Ipsos. What do we see here? Party with a better economic plan. Well, in May of 2024, just before Donald Trump was reelected president, Republicans had a 9-point advantage. Look at where we are now in May of 2025. The advantage actually went up by 3 points. Now Republicans have a 12-point advantage when it comes to the party with a better economic plan. And again, this is after months of supposed economic uncertainty in which the stock market's been going bonkers, in which the tariff wars that Americans are against have been going on. And yet, despite all of that, the Democrats are down by 12 points on the economy. This speaks to Democratic problems on the economy better than basically anything that you could possibly look at. The Republicans still hold an advantage on the all-important key issue of the day.
And that would be the economy and what you're spending for you and your family. A 12-point advantage. Now, whether acknowledging there's a Republican partisan, I should say political partisanship in there, because they're telling you here's where Republicans stand with it, here's where the others, but basically, what moves the needle? What changes your opinion about the economy? Well, I think when you go to buy gasoline and you realize, well, $8 a gallon? No way. That's going to change your opinion on it. Or you walk in and you see $2.80? That changes your opinion or solidifies it. CNN is trying to play both sides. They're talking about we can't rely on this poll we did for how much trust the American people have in the economy and the numbers because it's partisanship. And yet the other side, they've got another CNN poll backed up by a Reuters poll showing Americans believe the economy is doing a lot better. They're not buying all the doom and gloom. They're not buying the lies and the hypes about tariff wars will destroy everything and the sky will come falling down. Chicken Little all over again. Of course, they don't mind if you suffer. They want you to suffer. If you're suffering, then it might benefit them. No, that's not going to happen. Not going to happen this time around. We'll talk more about the big, beautiful bill and where it stands before we wrap up this hour. And as I mentioned, KJP, the White House spokeswoman, something she's now doing. But up next, an Illinois rancher and dealing with beef prices and what gets to your table at what cost and how. Lock and load. Ready, as always, on the right.
You are listening to Larry Connors, USA.
I want to tell you more about Wellington Environmental's dustless blasting services. Wellington can blast paint, grease, graffiti, even stripes off parking lots. Truly amazing and powerful. But can Wellington blast something more sensitive? Yes, Wellington can use dry ice to blast soot and odors off smoke-damaged surfaces right after a fire. Currently, Wellington uses dry ice to clean mold off wood inside a home. Why? Well, dry ice immediately disappears, turns into a vapor. That means no mess to clean up, no damaged surfaces. You need to check with Wellington, always researching and practicing with new, better, faster, safer equipment and products for you. And it's very easy to schedule an estimator for your next project. Call Cindy, 314-644-4930, 644-4930. Be well with Wellington. McGuire Moving is Silver certified, which means they are great at relocating senior citizens. In fact, McGuire is a household name because McGuire understands the stress involved when moving older adults. So if you or family members need help moving, I highly recommend McGuire Moving. 314-241-0600. 241-0600. Get a free in-home estimate. McGuireMoving.com. I've got a great evening planned for you. We start with dining at the Oak Street Inn Lounge in Cottleville. We enjoy sunset on the rooftop, then down to the speakeasy. Just one visit, you're going to see why I'm always talking about the Oak Street Inn and Lounge. Plus, you might want to plan a staycation, a romantic getaway. Check out OakStreetInnandLounge.com for various events this summer. Oak Street Inn and Lounge, Cottleville. Oak Street Inn and Lounge, Cottleville.
This is News Talk STL.
Roxanne, you don't have to put on the red light. Roxanne, you don't have to put on the red light. Roxanne.
This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.
Welcome back. I grew up in Texas, so I was around a lot of cattle, a lot of different times, both herding, branding, and other things, and worming them, things of that nature. And I've always loved cattle and being around them. In fact, I could just sit on the side of a farm field and watch the cattle graze, and I'm happy. That's one of my bright spots. But if you're a beef rancher, if you're raising them, there's a lot of stress that goes in. I don't care if you've got a big herd or a small herd, you still have stress involved. We have a farm called Sunnyside Farms in Greenville, Illinois. The owner is Lana Schaefer, joining us now. Lana, welcome aboard.
Larry, thanks.
So I'm looking at when you began. I really like your story as to that, how you got in. You basically were not doing any ranching, and then suddenly you decided that you were going to do something else. You went from interior design to raising cattle?
That's right. Everybody laughs when they hear that.
And why?
Well, a couple reasons. I moved to the country in Greenville, and I was leaving Greenville, running over to my design shop in Alton, loading up supplies, going over to St. Louis to design. And the running back and forth was just not feasible. So I was trying to find something that I could do in the country. And so as I was living there, I seen the cows everywhere. So I decided to do a farm to table business. And this was really before farm to table was farm to table.
Right.
So this was in 2014. It wasn't a big thing yet. My previous job from design was I was a nurse. And so I was looking for a healthy alternative to meat. And so that's how it started. So I traded in my high heels and my Lexus for some muck boots and a 1-ton dually, and I got to work.
Now, you currently have about 60 head, is that right?
That's correct.
Now, has that number varied much over the years, and why?
Yes, it has. Yes, it has. So just about 3 years ago, I was up to about 160 head. And the same thing, like everybody, the cost of hay, the cost of feed, everything drove up. And so everybody started depleting their herds. And then it does fluctuate, though, because when you have, I'm butchering steers, 2 to 6 steers every single month I'm butchering. And so whenever I'm butchering, the numbers go down. But then come spring, now you have 40 cows, you have 40 calves. Well, you just put another 40 head on the farm. So it can fluctuate easily and, changes from, month to month.
Well, I know you mentioned those years not that far back where you had problems, everyone did, with the cost of feed and everything. I remember a farmer friend I had down in Louisiana, and they were basically bringing in hay from North Dakota if they could get it, and they were paying something like 4 times for a bale of hay, a roll of hay, than they would if it had been closer.
That's correct. And so the drought of 2022 and 2023 were typically a regular bale of grass hay is about $50, and a round bale of alfalfa hay was $90. In those years, we were paying $120 for grass hay and up in the upwards of $190 for alfalfa. And that's because Oklahoma, Kansas, Texas, all of those areas that got hit with the drought you would see semis coming into our area, and we were shipping hay out to all of those states.
Now, another part of that, I remember back in the late 60s into the 70s in Texas, the price of feed of any type got to be so high, and there was no market for them. They were digging holes, bulldozers, and then herding cattle in and shooting them, covering them up, because they could not continue to keep them alive for a market that wasn't going to be there.
That's correct. That's correct. And we're seeing that now. So when we had the drought as well, usually in like 2020, 2021, corn prices were hanging around $4.50. Well, when the drought hit, they were up in the upwards of $6 or $7. So not only could farmers, $6 to $7 a bushel of corn. So not only could farmers not only afford that, but the people who had corn and cows, they decided to sell their cattle and take their corn to the river, because it's cheaper just to drive it to the river and sell it than it would have been to feed an animal for 2 years before you can butcher it.
And then you get into the interest rates, and we're having to deal with at that point.
As well. So most of the farms do have operating notes. And 2022, again, the interest rates were around 2 to 3%. Then in 2024, they were up to 8%. It doesn't pencil out when you're paying 8% on an operation note to feed cattle. Now they are back down around 5%, but I do know many farms completely dispersed their herds. And the ones that did have them at 2 and 3%, and they sold their herds because they didn't have feed due to the drought, they can't replace those herds now at 6 and 7%.
Now, that's the other issue. I mean, farming, be you raising crops or livestock, you know, you have to depend so much upon God and what comes with the bounty of the rain or lack of rain when you have too much so you can get the crops out. I don't know of another occupation that is so dependent upon basically the bounty of God.
That's exactly right. We're not in control. And if you ever think you're in control, just wait a couple months and you'll find out you're not.
Now, you talking about you're doing farm to table, and that you were doing that before that became common. A lot of restaurants now like to advertise local farm to table. In other words, it hasn't been doctored, hasn't been pumped up with various hormones and so forth, and it's grown locally. That is still a good niche, but the prices are still going up.
That's correct. So in 2022, for instance, a quarter of beef was about $700. And now a quarter of a beef has increased by about $250.
Wow.
And yes, but at markets, so for instance, right now, this month, just last week, anything that was shipped to Tyson, they're getting $3.60 a pound. That's hanging weight. That's not, I mean, that's unbelievable. And 2 years ago, it was $2.50 a pound.
Now,
So the price that
take a
Tyson-
moment to explain hanging weight.
So a hanging weight is after the animal is butchered and gutted, and that is just the carcass that is hanging there.
Right.
So, for instance, an animal that went to Tyson 2 years ago that you would get about $2,800 for, now that animal is bringing $4,200. That's just as goes as well for a bred cow. So a third stage bred cow just last week at Greenville Auction Barn, they were going for $4,200 a head. That same exact animal 18 months ago, you could buy for $1,500 cheaper. I mean, this is something that we have never seen, you know, since 1950.
So where's the blame lay, or is there blame to pushed around?
Well, the blame lay is number one, we had a huge loss. Not only did people disperse their herds, but we had a loss of animals during the drought. Animals that were actually lost their lives. Also, the wildfires. You know, the USDA has gave over $1 billion in disbursement of funds in 2023 and 2024 to replace these cattle herds to ranchers. However, that doesn't mean that you can replace the cattle herd overnight.
Right.
So what that means is they're able to birth. So the heifers that were birthed, let's say in 2023 and 2024, it's going to take them 24 months before they produce an offspring. That means the offspring are probably being born this year in 2025. Now it's going to take another 2 years, 18 months to 2 years before we're going to see a decrease in prices, because that's how long it's going to take for those cattle to become steers and to be able to be fat enough to go to market.
Well, the Bureau of Labor Stats is saying beef prices, steak is up 7% over last year this time, ground beef up 10%, and yet they say we think it will settle down by the second quarter or third quarter of next year, this year rather, maybe the second quarter of next year. So obviously you can't just produce them overnight. They have to be conceived and born and raised.
That's right. That's right. So it's going to take a couple years to recover from this.
And even big groups like Omaha Steaks is admitting, they just have difficulty with supply.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's just something that's going to take time. And they say end of this year. I'll believe it when I see it. I still think we're a year or two out.
And is that your view optimistic or pessimistic?
I think it's very optimistic. I mean, I think it's going to happen. I just think it's going to, it's going to take time. Right now, we're bringing in all these imports of beef, and luckily, that is going to help the consumers at the grocery store, because I know that on all the tariffs, there has been some bills signed and there has been an exemption on the tariffs for beef.
That again reinforces why Sunnyside Farms in Illinois that you have and other local farmers raising stock and our crops should have some benefit, some value over imports.
Absolutely. And I tell you, I've already seen it. So many people that didn't even own a freezer, they see it. They see the prices at the grocery store. So they said, I had to order a freezer, but they're ordering freezers. They're going to the local farmer and they're buying quarters or halves. And that way they can, even though it's higher than what it's been, it's still cheaper than going to the grocery store.
All right. Well, I wish you the best with Sunnyside Farms. By the way, Lana had told me earlier when we were setting up this interview, she said, I'm busy butchering some cattle. I had to get, she had blood on her hands. That's what we came down to, right?
That's right. That's right, Larry.
Thank you, Lana. I appreciate the information, and the audience does as well.
Thank you. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Wish you the best. Coming up again, the big, beautiful bill and the concerns.
You can connect with Larry on Twitter at Larry Connors USA.
Question: are you looking to unlock the full potential of artificial intelligence for your business? I want you to meet my friends at PRI Global, named by the St. Louis Business Journal as a leading IT consulting firm. 25 years helping local and worldwide companies. PRI Global has a free survey to determine where your company stands in your AI journey. You simply go to priglobal.ai. priglobal.ai. And I also have a phone number, so get ready to copy that number. And I'll remind you that PRI Global has its own AI lab, creating, adapting, developing, pushing the boundaries for what AI can do for you. Here's the number, 636-689-0545. 636-689-0545. Or visit priglobal.ai. priglobal.ai. Here's great news. Napoli Kirkwood is now open. So that means fine dining right in the heart of Kirkwood. So you have the original Cafe Napoli in downtown Clayton, Napoli 2, Town and Country, Napoli 3 on the streets of St. Charles, right next door to Napoli C, plus Napoli Brothers Pasta and Pizza in the Chesterfield Valley. All of those locations, and now adding Napoli Kirkwood. What a great place to dine. Napoli Kirkwood, now open. Since 1995, Renewal by Andersen has helped St. Louis homeowners upgrade with windows and doors. Now it's our 30th anniversary sale. You'll get $1,995 off every project. No gimmicks, real savings, and the nation's best warranty. The offer ends June 30th, so you don't want to wait. There are some restrictions. Visit rbastl.com. Renewal by Andersen. Superior products, exceptional service. You've worked hard for your money. So protect it. Meet my friend Bob Leslie and ask about the Gain and Retain plan. Leslie Consulting, 40 years in the St. Louis area as a leader in brokerage and risk management. Call 314-721-0066, 721-0066. Oh, and ask Bob how he was the L.A. Dodger #1 pick. LeslieConsulting.com.
This is News Talk STL. This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.
President Trump's big, beautiful bill already facing hurdles in the Senate, now facing some heat from Elon Musk.
Peter Ducey is live at the White House with the details. Good morning, Peter.
Good morning. And President Trump thinks this is simple. He now says about the big, beautiful bill, so many false statements are being made about the one big, beautiful bill. But what nobody understands is that it's the single biggest spending cut in history by far. There will be no cuts to Social Security, Medicare, or Medicaid. The president's problem, though, right now is that he's losing some Republicans he needs in the Senate, like Rand Paul. When Elon Musk posts that Congress is making America bankrupt, Rand Paul writes, "Some of us are trying to stop that." And the president responded to Paul. He said, Rand Paul has very little understanding of the BBB, especially of the tremendous growth that is coming. He loves voting no on everything. He thinks it's good politics, but it's not. The BBB is a big winner. But the one thing that got everybody's attention yesterday here at the White House was this post from Elon Musk. "I'm sorry, but I just can't stand it anymore. This massive, outrageous, pork-filled congressional spending bill is a disgusting abomination."
That's strong language from Elon Musk, who headed up the Doge team to save the U.S. government money, taxpayers' money. And he's saying that, look, all the money we were able to save and had in position to save by uncovering scams and stopping payments, things of that nature, to Medicaid people who weren't even born yet, or for those over 150, he said, you're wiping it all out with this bill. Now, that was his opinion. I'll let you hear what Trump thinks about that in a moment. But Republicans that are already kind of against the bill don't like it, and they're saying, what it comes down to, they believe, regarding Musk, is that it's because he is not getting what he wanted in green tax credits for electronic vehicles. They're noting that Musk might have a more vested interest in opposing it than even his post suggests. The legislation does axe billions of dollars in tax credits that would benefit Tesla and his business empire. I leave it to you. You think that is why Musk is complaining about it, saying it's an abomination? Well, former House Speaker Newt Gingrich was on Stuart Varney.
Did Elon Musk just blow up the big, beautiful bill?
No, I think he's a brilliant guy. He single-handedly has put Americans back into space in a big way. But he doesn't understand politics. He proved over the last 4 months that it was an interesting experiment and it didn't work. And I think very few House or Senate members are going to take him seriously.
Really?
Yeah, they're just going to, I mean, look.
Oh, they dismiss his comment.
They're just going to say this is not, he doesn't know what he's talking about. Now, I do think there are senators who have very real concerns on the spending side. And Trump's going to have to work with them to find a way to make them more comfortable, because it's not an automatic yes. And some are very serious guys who've been around a long time.
I can't imagine it not passing. I mean, what would happen if it didn't pass? Eventually,
I have a big imagination, so I can imagine it not passing, but I would bet that it will pass. But it will take Trump personally meeting with individual senators, listening to their concerns, and in some cases, finding creative solutions outside the bill.
And that will probably happen. He did the same thing with House Republicans who were reluctant to sign on to it till they finally got enough to pass it through. Senator Rand Paul had stated just yesterday, most Republicans, not me, did vote to continue the Biden spending levels in March. So we're going to go through September of this year. And the deficit for this year is going to be over $2 trillion. If you're borrowing $5 trillion, that makes me think you're going to add another $2 trillion, maybe $2.8 trillion next year. It does not show me you've turned things around. They said, I think there are 4 people who are skittish about these spending levels. Some of them skittish about $5 trillion. I think I'm most vocal on all fronts, but most are starting to come to this realization. And he's got support from Senator Ron Johnson. He says the bill that's in front of the Senate right now is, his words, grotesque, saying it will not pass. Then on the other side, you've got Senator Marshall Blackburn of Tennessee saying the Senate will make the bill better than the House version. It will pass, but not as it came out of the House. Now that you have to accept was most likely going to be true anyway. The Senate's simply not going to rubber stamp what comes from the House. They'll make changes and alterations. How big? Well, it's going to go back to the House to be marked up again. And if it's good enough, then they'll pass it and it goes to the president's desk. Is it going to be the big, beautiful bill that he wanted and proposed? Is it going to be dragged down because of the complaints from Senator Rand Paul, Senator Johnson, and Musk? What is the real story? Well, it's very complicated. It's very complicated. I've got 2 stories here. I want to read you the headlines. The headlines alone tell you just how complicated this is. Now, I've got some background in studies in economics, but not to the degree that most experts, well, not the degree of any experts have. But these headlines say everything. One of them from Fox News saying this bill, the House bill, we're talking about as it's presented to the Senate, will save $3.7 trillion in taxpayer money. Save $3.7 trillion for taxpayers. That's a headline on Fox. A headline on CNN says the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, estimates this is going to cost $2.4 trillion more than what it's marked up to be, which is correct. If you want to decide on politics, that might answer it, but the math is the math. And there are a lot of pieces in there. Musk has already said there's too much pork still in the bill, but the pork for him for electronic vehicle tax credits is not there. That's reason enough for him to not like it, but I think for what he's been doing for the government, that he's trying to give you a fair appraisal. What do you think? And more importantly, what does President Trump think about Musk and his reaction?
Well, first of all, I can't speak more highly about any individual. He's an incredible guy. He's a brilliant guy. He's a wonderful person. I've seen him with his family. I've seen him with a lot of his children. He's got a lot of children. He treats them good. He loves his children. But he's a brilliant guy. And he was a tremendous help, both in the campaign and in what he's done with Doge. And, you know, we're talking about almost $200 billion and rising fast, because many of the things that we were looking at are now being found out to be fact. It's terrible. I mean, the fraud, the waste, the abuse, the everything that's happened is just terrible. So I also know that he was treated very unfairly by the, I guess you'd call it the public, by some of the public, not by all of it.
Yeah, he's talking about those running around burning Teslas, shooting them up, scratching them up, hurting actually the owners of that particular car, but also firebombing and shooting into Tesla stores, basically threatening lives of anyone who got in the way. I wonder where those folks are now. They say, oh, now we like Musk again. They loved Musk when he was presenting the electric vehicle. Good, get us off of fossil fuel. No more worry about fossil fuel. We'll go all electric, and Musk can make it happen. But then when he joins with Trump and goes in and starts looking at all the blowouts, the expenditures, the scams, the crime that was taking place, they didn't like that. It's always a question of whose ox got gored, right? You should know this, the SCOTUS decision regarding the Maryland assault weapons ban. Supreme Court Justice John Roberts and Justices, both of these appointed by Trump, Brett Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett, have sided with the three liberal justices rejecting to hear a challenge to Maryland's assault weapons ban. As a result, the assault weapons ban in Maryland stands, and that means similar bans in 8 other states: Washington, California, Illinois, New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Delaware are all able to enforce their assault weapons ban. Justices Neil Gorsuch, Alito, Thomas made it clear they would have heard the challenge to the Maryland assault weapons ban. But Gorsuch, Alito, and Thomas publicly noted they had disagreement with the majority refusal to even take the case. The Western Journal claims that Justice Thomas made clear his concerns. The refusal to hear the challenge leaves the door open for a similar and perhaps more egregious ban at the federal level. That is what I would also be concerned about. And for Justice Amy Coney Barrett and Kavanaugh to side with the liberal justices, and of course Supreme Court Justice Roberts doing the same, dealing with assault weapons ban, when I still don't know what really is, quote, an assault weapon. And I don't think a lot of the people in the general public can tell me what an assault weapon is. Any weapon can be an assault weapon. My ballpoint pen can be an assault weapon. In the meantime, Trump is pushing forward to do what he can to help make America great again, and it begins with drill, baby, drill.
Drill, baby, drill. That mission being executed right now in Alaska, where the Trump administration is moving to unlock millions of acres in the National Petroleum Reserve by taking a bulldozer to Biden's crazy climate rules.
The White House to scrap a 2024 drilling ban that Interior Secretary Doug Burgum says wasn't just bad policy, but also broke the law and blocked energy projects critical to U.S. supply.
This is not a wilderness area. This was set aside back in the 1920s by President Wilson as specifically as a naval strategic petroleum reserve. And the idea that Biden could somehow try to turn it into wilderness last year with the stroke of a pen is ridiculous. This is a strategic petroleum reserve for the country.
And that's why we need to open it up. And that brings into question again the auto pen being used to sign off on that bill to put a stop to the drilling in Alaska. Now that's off. Karine Jean-Pierre, former White House press secretary, I discussed to some extent in the last hour. I want to go back to her story as we wrap up this final and second hour for tonight. She's a longtime Democrat Party operative, and she is leaving the Democrat Party. She said, I'm done with them. She said, I want to go independent. And she's got a book coming out. Whoa, looky. Another book about what's happening when they were lying to us. Her new book is titled Independent, a look inside a broken White House outside the party lines. Her press secretary says that she didn't take leaving the party lightly, but I thought I was needed. She said, at noon on January 20th, I became a private citizen, and I think it's time to contend with what was going to come next for our country. And we need to be willing to exercise the ability to think creatively, plan strategically. Said, what I decided to do is follow my own compass. That's what I've done. That's what this book does, she claims. The way I see moving forward in this space we're in right now is if you're willing to stand side by side with me, regardless of how you identify politically, as long as you respect the communities I belong to and the vulnerable communities that I respect, I will be there with you. I will move forward with you. You know, she's speaking very much like many Americans inside the MAGA movement, and certainly the independent movement. The description of the book that's supposedly going to be released in October says it will look at the 3 weeks that led to Biden abandoning his bid for a second term and the betrayal by the Democrat Party that led to his decision. This has more value, and I think, than Jake Tapper's original sin, acknowledging, we got misled, we didn't ask the right question, we didn't see Biden was not fit. Karine Jean-Pierre, if the book is going to live up to the advanced publicity, the very title, A Look Inside a Broken White House, outside the party lines, that, I have to admit, might have more value than the Jake Tapper book. I might have to give her credit for writing a little bit more detail and a little more truth. When you're the White House press secretary, I know you have to carry the water for the president until it's scalding hot and you say, I'm not touching that anymore. But she stayed as long as she could and would still be there, except for Trump in, Biden out, and the rest of them. Remember our pledge, one nation under God.
You can follow Larry on Larry Connors USA Facebook. Larry Connors USA Facebook. This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.